And please kindly move forward so that we can fill the seats in front. Kindly move forward so that we can fill the seats in front. And if you're sitting near someone you haven't seen this year, please help me to wish the person a Happy New Year. If you can give the person a warm handshake, please do. If you can smile to the person, please do. But don't forget to do the same to Professor Samuel. Once again, greet me. Once again, I warmly welcome you. And it is our 55th convocation ceremonies. And it is the convocation lecture this morning. Before now, the university had commissioned a couple of projects. And for those who were around, you will agree with me that it has been a year of harvest for our university. We welcome you to University of Lagos. We pride ourselves as the university of first choice and the nation's pride. Please give our university a round of applause, please. Thank you. Thank you very much. The procession will soon come in. But before then, let me warmly welcome and recognize members of Council of University of Lagos. Oh, the procession is here. I crave your indulgence, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, to please let's stand up. Please let's stand up for the procession. Thank you.
Shall we remain upstanding as we take the national anthem of Nigeria? We will also remain upstanding to take the University of Lagos anthem.
Nigeria, we hail thee, our own dear native land. Though tribe and tongue may differ, in brotherhood we stand. Nigerians all and proud to serve our sovereign motherland.
University of Lagos, the rising sun, our fountain of excellence, our citadel of learning, my God at the front, for all sound minds. We rise beyond the skies. Our mission is to uphold the great heritage where the nations thrive. There's justice, scholarship, and excellence, there's knowledge and character, producing exemplary global leaders. God bless you, we rise beyond the skies. Our mission is to uphold the great heritage where the nations thrive. We rise beyond the skies. Our mission is to uphold the great heritage where the nations
Great Akokite. Great Akokite. Greatest Akokite. You may please be seated. May I invite Professor Aderonke Samuel?
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. And it's our pleasure to welcome you to our university, the University of First Choice and the nation's pride. It is our 55th convocation ceremonies, and today is our convocation lecture. Please let's give ourselves a round of applause. It is a whole new year, another year. The last time we did this was a year ago. And so I warmly welcome you. And this morning, let me say that our chair is already seated with us. The guest lecturer is in the house, and we're ready to give the template for discussions in our nation for the next 12 months. Please give us a round of applause. Our Vice Chancellor, the one whose tenure has brought this, I'm glad to say, please a round of applause to Professor Folashade Ogushola, ON, FAS, the 13th Vice Chancellor of our university, University of Lagos. Please give her a round of applause. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, our Pro-Chancellor is here seated in our midst. And it is a pleasure to have our Pro-Chancellor, Chief Wole Olaonipekun, CFR, SAN. A round of applause to our Pro-Chancellor. Thank you, sir. I'm glad to also say that members of management of University of Lagos are here seated with us. Our Deputy Vice Chancellor, Development Services, Professor Ayodele Asenua. Good afternoon, ma'am. The Deputy Vice Chancellor, Management Services, Professor Lucian Chukwu. It's a pleasure to have all of us here. Our Registrar, Acting Registrar, Mrs. Olakunle Makinde. Please give her a round of applause. Our Bossa, Mrs. Oluwafumilola Adekunle. A round of applause, please. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, permit me, it is a bad oversight. Our DVC, Academic and Research, under whose purview all of this is happening. A round of applause for the DVC, from whose department 2 perfect scores had emerged. Professor Bola Obo. A round of applause for her, please. Professor Yetunde Zaid is our university librarian. And the newly minted provost of the College of Medicine, University of Lagos, is our Professor Ademola Oremosu. Please give him a round of applause. It's a pleasure to have all of us back here. But let me quickly say that the Council of the University of Lagos is also here seated. A round of applause and a warm welcome to members of Council of University of Lagos, chaired by Chief Wole Olaunipekun, SAN CFR. A round of applause for them. Let me quickly recognize Dr. Mrs. Bola Njoku. Thank you, ma'am. Please, a round of applause. The Council of the University of Lagos. Professor Olusegun Idowu, please give him a round of applause. Chief Oyeniyi Akande, a round of applause. Professor Mike Adebamowo, please give them a round of applause. Professor Owolabi Kuye, a round of applause. Professor Matthew Ilori, please give him a round of applause. Professor Lukemi Odukoya, Professor Solomon Akimboye, a round of applause, please. Last but of course not the least is Engineer Ifeoluwa Oyedele. He is the alumni president. Please, a round of applause for him as well. I warmly welcome all of us to this lecture. I also want to recognize the representative of the British High Commission, British Deputy High Commission, Lagos, Wale Adebajo. Please give him a round of applause. I warmly recognize all of us distinguished guests here, our retired professors, heads of departments, directors, and all of us here seated. I know that by the end of the template for discussions in our country for the next 1 year. The title this morning of our lecture is Universities as Hubs for Development and Wealth Creation. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, once again we welcome you warmly to University of Lagos, to our 55th convocation ceremonies, and to the convocation lecture. Let me come to welcome you properly, our Vice Chancellor, Professor Folashade Ogunshola, OON, FAS, the 13th Vice Chancellor of our university, University of Lagos, the University of First Choice, and the nation's pride. Ma'am.
The chairman of the occasion, Mr. Babatunde Raji Fashola, the pro-chancellor, Chief Oluwole Oladapo Olanipekun, and members of the University Governing Council, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Development Services, Professor Ayodele Ashenua, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Management Services, Professor Lucien Chukwu, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academics and Research, Professor Bola Obo, the Acting Registrar, Mrs. Olakunle Makinde, the Bursar, Mrs. Olufumilola Adekunle, the University Librarian, Professor Yetunde Zaid, the Provost College of Medicine, Professor Ademola Oremosu, Deans of Faculty, former Vice Chancellors, our Royal Fathers, Directors and Heads of Departments and Units, President of the Alumni Association, and members of the Alumni Association here present, students, distinguished ladies and gentlemen of the press. It gives me really great pleasure to welcome you all to this year's convocation lecture. These lectures serve to throw more light on complex societal issues, especially as they concern universities or their interaction or impact on society. The activities of the 55th convocation ceremonies commenced on Friday, January 10, with a special Jumat service at the University Central Mosque. This morning, we visited the exhibition that showcased the works and innovations of our staff and students at the Senate Car Park. It is always an inspiring and gratifying event to see the quality of work on display. I implore those of you who have not yet visited to do so and engage with them. In an era of rapid changes in knowledge, innovation, and complex challenges, it is imperative to continuously evaluate how well our university is doing in fulfilling its social contract with society, to provide fit-for-purpose manpower, generate new knowledge to address societal problems, and provide technology to shape the future. Today's convocation lecture, titled Universities as Hubs for Development and Wealth Creation, keys into the central questions that we ask ourselves constantly at the University of Lagos, which I know is applicable to all universities in Nigeria. How do we use and optimize the talent in our universities? How do we convert the knowledge and theories to policies, devices, and enterprises that drive development? How do we produce value that drives wealth creation? I believe we got the right person, Dr. Tayo Aduloju, the CEO Nigeria Economic Summit Group, to fully interrogate these questions in today's lecture. Dr. Aduloju, our convocation lecturer, is a distinguished, fully rounded professional whose contributions include reform initiatives in several socio-economic fields such as aviation, agriculture, finance, fiscal development, human resources, governance, performance management, investment promotion, maritime, and transportation. We therefore look forward to insights from this lecture that will help us to make our universities platforms for transformational development. Higher education has long been a pathway out of poverty, enabling individuals to break the cycles of inequality. But the traditional view of a university as an ivory tower of intellectual pursuit is increasingly outdated. Universities can no longer be mere repositories of knowledge. They must be dynamic players in the creation of wealth and the advancement of societies. It is against this backdrop that today's convocation lecture by Dr. Tayo Aduloju will be delivered, and I am confident that we will garner new insights that will broaden our perspectives, reshape mindsets, and create a new impetus to drive change that will move us firmly into the future and sustain our relevance in national development. We are also privileged to have with us His Excellency, Mr. Babatunde Raji Fashola, former Governor of Lagos State and Minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, to chair the occasion. He is a long-standing friend of the university, and I know that 11 years ago, he delivered our School of Postgraduate Studies lecture. His choice as chairman was not by accident, but because of his progressive mindset, his interest in the education sector, his unique perspectives, and the clarity that he always brings to national issues. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I believe we're in for a treat this afternoon. So let us sit back and be fully educated. And I believe that when we leave this place today, we will be inspired and determined to drive the change in our different areas of influence that will support our universities to not only thrive, but soar. It is in our collective interest. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Matt. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, now we have met the chair of this lecture, and we have also met the guest lecturer. At this point, I crave your indulgence to call our council chair, our Pro-Chancellor, to please come for his remarks. So I have the pleasure to call to this podium the Pro-Chancellor of our university, Chief Wole Olanipekun, CFR, SAN.
The chairman of this occasion, my brother, my friend, my colleague, Mr. Babatunde Raji Fashola, His Excellency, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Lagos. This morning, I gave you so many names: amazing, performing Vice Chancellor, Titan, Mitra, and World Champion. You deserve all and more. May I appreciate members of the University Governing Council. Thank you. Your presence here this afternoon is very symbolic. Speaking volumes, sending messages. Perhaps we'll say more about that much later and not here, so that we can allow the gentleman who is going to give us a treat to have his full day. The convocation lecturer and members of the management team of the university, on behalf of the Governing Council, we join the Vice Chancellor in welcoming you to this year's convocation lecture. And the title is also topical: Universities as Hubs for Development and Wealth Creation. This morning, the University of Lagos has given us some tokenisms connected with the topic of the convocation lecture by the 3 projects that were commissioned, by what we saw at the exhibition grounds. How innovative, how creative, how dynamic. The utility value of the University of Lagos to its immediate environment, the connectivity between the gown and the town and gown. I think this is what the lecture represents. I don't want to preempt what the guest speaker and lecturer is going to say, but let me make this observation. This topic is not just important to us as a university community, but also as a nation. What am I saying? I would have expected that by now this hall would be filled up. There is a feast. The servers are around, but the tables are empty. I want to plead that as a university, we show more interest in this type of activity. It's so important to energizing the university, to encouraging us, and to sending message to the larger world that we are ready to reenact the Nigerian Renaissance. That's the very essence of the university and of the academia. I want to appreciate all of you, those of us who are here, and I want to believe that by the time my brother, my friend, my learned brother of the Silk, the chairman of this occasion, before he finishes his remarks, or making his remarks, will have gotten a thicker audience. Thank you, and God bless.
Another round of applause for the Pro-Chancellor and the Chairman of the Governing Council of University of Lagos, Chief Oluwole Olanikpekun, SAN, CFR. Moving swiftly and quickly, may I humbly and respectfully invite the Chairman of this convocation lecture, His Excellency Mr. Babatunde Raji Fashola, SAN, CON, former Executive Governor of Lagos State and former Federal Minister of Works and Housing. A round of applause for him as he steps up.
Thank you. Good morning. Oh, good afternoon and Happy New Year. I wish you all a very prosperous 2025 and the years after it. The Pro-Chancellor, my noble and learned Egmont and friend, a leader at the bar, Chief Wole Olanipekun, SAN, CFR, and so many other epithets. The Vice Chancellor, very dedicated and hard-working leader of this university community. Professor Bushola, members of the university management team, eminent professors there, members of the governing council. Let me say first that when I was in school, professors and lecturers looked much older than they look today. And in the last few weeks, as I prepared to attend what is my inaugural session as chairman of a convocation lecture, which is happening in UNILAG today, I then said to myself, if professors and vice chancellors are looking younger, it only means one thing: you are getting older. And so, from being convocation and guest lecturer, I have been very, very, I think, appropriately elevated to convocation lecture chairman. And this is my debut, thanks to this university. But let me say that I am truly, truly honored to chair this event, the convocation lecture for this year. And just being here brings back very fond memories of my long history with this institution. I recall my first interaction was in March 15, 2007, when I participated in a gubernatorial election debate on this campus as a candidate of the Action Congress. We debated the issues of infrastructure development, security, education, waste management, and so on. And those are subliminal issues to the issue that we will hear about today. But it is important that the University of Lagos, back then, was one of the universities who took interest in what was happening on the political stage, because it would affect the economic and social order of the state, and it would affect wealth creation and development. And they decided they wanted to hear from all the candidates who were then vying for governor. And I think that is important, and I think that tradition should continue. On March 29, 2011, as I sought a renewal of my mandate as your governor then, we came back here again for another debate. In between the two debates and since then, I have had the privilege of engaging with this community on several occasions. And I must remark how truly exciting it is to come back here because of its peaceful and convivial nature. Some of my notable interactions include opportunities to deliver lectures like the School of Postgraduate Studies 8th annual lecture with the topic Education, Research, and National Development. So this is something UNILAG has been involved in for a while, and the sub-theme was bridging the gap between the town and the gown, something about which our Pro-Chancellor has spoken about again today, and that was in 2012. I recall interactions where I was asked by the Department of Economics in 2017 to give a speech on the public lecture series titled Power Sector Reforms, Challenges and the Way Forward. Again, these are developmental issues. I happened at the time to be Minister responsible for power. On another occasion, following the application of the license to modify the topic granted me by the Executive Director, University of Lagos Business School, Professor Abraham Oshinubi, while I was delivering a virtual lecture, I modified the proposed topic and changed it to value creation in the public service, in the public sector, the role of professionals, how infrastructure creates value. These experiences, among several others, have deepened my appreciation for the University of Lagos's commitment to academic excellence, innovation, community service, and development. It would be remiss of me to forget to acknowledge some of the patriotic gentlemen and ladies whom I would appropriately describe as midwives of interaction between the town and the gown. In no particular order, I recall the services rendered by Professor Ayodele Asenwa when in 2009, our team began the implementation of the provisions of the amendment to the criminal laws of Lagos State, which had been in force for about 100 years. She served as the chairperson. Please keep the applause going for her. She served as the chairperson of the committee along with another member of this community, Professor Akim Bello, that submitted his report in 2 volumes, consisting of an executive summary, a draft law, and commentaries and explanatory notes on some of the recommendations. Those laws have since gone to change lives in a most impactful way. There is also Professor Uyewo of the Department of Public Law, who served meritoriously on the 10-member committee of the Lagos State Research and Development Council in 2012. In the area of the environment, we had tremendous support from Professor Babajide Alo, who is also in the hall. So our efforts, tree planting, greening Lagos, managing climate change, UNILAG was also there again through Professor Alo. He was a fantastic resource person at our annual summit. I cannot forget the enduring contributions of Professor Olumide Olusonya, who I believe is now retired, of the Faculty of Environmental Science in the Department of Architecture, in the area of road transport infrastructure, with very forward-thinking and practical purposes on traffic alteration and rearrangement concepts. So if you are driving in front of Muson and you are going to Victoria Island today on the Lagos Island, and you don't have to go to Nitel to go and turn and face 2 hours traffic, the solution was from this university. As we gather, therefore, to celebrate achievements of our graduating students and parents, beginning from today, I am excited to listen to today's lecture and to chair the event, which deals with the important theme of universities as hubs for development and wealth creation. Our distinguished speaker, Dr. Oluwatayo David Aduloju, the Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, will share valuable insights and perspectives on this critical subject. But before I yield the podium to him, I would like to express my very deep gratitude once again to the University of Lagos for the opportunity to serve as chairman of today's convocation lecture. I am very confident that today's events will inspire meaningful discussions, foster new connections, and open new vistas in the oft-repeated call for a meaningful handshake between the town and the gown in the interest of our nation's development. That said, as I told you when I started, this is my maiden and debut chairmanship event. I believe that the tradition is for chairmen to have the final say by way of closing remarks. I will keep my gunpowder dry until then. Thank you very much for your attention.
Another resounding applause for His Excellency, the former Governor of Lagos State, and Federal Ministry of Works and Housing, Mr. Babatunde Raji Fashola, SAN-CON. Another round of applause for him. In all he said one thing: University of Lagos are solution providers. A round of applause for the University of First Choice and the nation's pride. Moving swiftly and quickly, the title of today's lecture is Universities as Hubs for Development and Wealth Creation. And the Vice Chancellor talked about Dr. Tayo Aduloju, the CEO of Nigeria Economic Summit Group. But to further help us understand who Dr. Tayo Aduloju is, may I respectfully invite our Brown New University orator, Professor Adewale Olawoyin, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, for the citation of the guest lecturer.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to present the citation of the guest lecturer of the 55th Convocation Ceremonies of the University of Lagos. May I invite the guest lecturer to stand? Dr. Tayo Aduloju, the Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, NESG, Africa's foremost private sector-led think tank and policy advocacy group, is a policy entrepreneur, strategist, economist, scholar, teacher, and global development expert, most sought after for his competencies and capabilities in translating strategic agendas into results. Before his role, he served as Chief Operating Officer and Senior Fellow, Economic Policy, Strategy, and Competitiveness at the NESG, and Okun Model Economic Fellow for Africa and the Middle East. His over 2 decades of experience and track record demonstrate his commitment to developing and advising leaders, organizations, and nations to stimulate performance, sustainability, governance, and impact across private, public, and non-profit sectors. He has worked across several economic, social, and political reform areas and sectors across Nigeria, 14 other African countries, and the Middle East, where he has advised business executives and heads of government, including former Presidents Yar'Adua and Obasanjo. Tayo holds 6 academic degrees, some of which are a master's in data, economics, and development policy, a master's in public administration, a doctor of philosophy in public policy and administration, and another doctorate in economic policy and public administration. He has had an impactful postdoctoral scholar practitioner career in economic growth diagnostics and multidimensional poverty analysis, economic policy, public administration, and strategic management, and formal and executive education that cuts across leading institutions like Harvard University, Oxford University, MIT, and INSEAD. Tayo is a senior executive fellow of the John F. Kennedy School of Government, Harvard University. His versatility shows in the number of distinguished fellowships he has been awarded from various professional institutes: the Institute of Management of Consultants, the Institute of Strategic Management Nigeria Chartered, the National Institute of Credit Administration, the Chartered Institute of Administration, and Chief of Staff Association. He is a member of the Chartered Institute of Directors and Nigerian Economic Society. He is also a board member of the Governing Council of the Nigerian Institute of Management Chartered. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Dr. Tayo Aduloju. Thank you.
Thank you. The Pro-Chancellor, the Vice-Chancellor, the Chairman of the Convocation Lecture, His Excellency, who needs no introduction, the Deputy Chancellor, Development Services, Deputy Chancellor, Management Services, Deputy Chancellor, Academics and Research, members of Council, distinguished academic, professional, and colleagues here, captains of industry, my lords, spiritual and temporal, ladies and gentlemen, when I was asked to deliver this convocation lecture, a couple of things came to my mind. One of the things that the orator did not note, which I keep out of my CV, was as a teenager, my first training was seminarian training. So convocation has a very different meaning, of course, from the seminaries. But convocation began in the Church of England. It was a term used to convene priests around a subject that captured the spirit of the moment. So convoque meant you pulled the members together to capture the spirit of the moment. It was only fitting then that in 1577, Oxford University became the first university to use this term, convocation, to carry a different meaning, which was to summon scholars into existence. The University of Lagos has its own rich culture and commitment to academic excellence that signs off as a beacon of hope and inspiration to future generations. And the convocation lecture here at the University of Lagos is unique in many ways, because one of those ways is unique is that it captures this original essence of convocation. So whilst preparing, I thought to myself, what's the spirit of the convocation in UNILAG? Maybe go back a few years. To be honest, I was shocked to find many of the lectures well preserved. So I think I watched 15 lectures before this one. So thank you for being great record keepers. But I note that from the fifth convocation lecture, there was a decisiveness of the convocation lectures to begin to present projects, ideas, paradigms, ideologies that would advance the university system in what was clearly a changing world. So the 50th lecture was very reflective about how do you posture the intellectual elite with the transformative power of knowledge in an era that was very different from the past. The 52nd lecture, delivered by the former Speaker of the House of Representatives, now the Chief of Staff to the President, was a tour de force. It happened during COVID, and it was about building back better. And he challenged the university system at that time to undergo systematic regulatory policy and legislative changes that an era of disruption required. The 53rd Convocation lecture, which was delivered at the debut of the current Vice Chancellor of the university, was delivered by my friend and brother, Chineye, and he then spoke about this idea of the arc of the possible, what was achievable if we pursued a different trajectory of learning. And he spoke about how gross national enrollments cannot be scaled up using the current model. It required something very transformative. And of course, when you bring Professor Falola, Professor of History, back to discuss the decolonization of African higher education for transformational development, you could get nothing but what we got. Professor Falola challenged us about the weaponization of definitions. That it was important that Africa did not simply accept concepts wholesale, especially concepts that de-Africanized our contribution to the development of the human race. This is the spirit of UNILAG's convocation lectures. It carries this essence of being catalytic, of being transformational, of being contextual, but also of being prophetic about the arc of possibilities. So when shaping this paper, I thought to myself, I'll attempt to answer some questions that my predecessor lecturers didn't, and I'll leave some questions unanswered for future convocation lecturers. Mr. Chairman, I have to admit immediately at the beginning that I'm not an academic in the strictest sense. I've devoted my life to a scholar-practitioner construct where I look at how theory applies to real-world problems. So my critical realist perspective tends to have flaws because sometimes I'll deviate completely from the theory. At other times, I'll try and force the practical into the conceptual. The resultant is sometimes noisy. But it's an attempt by someone who deeply respects the walls of the university system as it was developed and meant to serve its purpose, as someone who tries to see that it serves the greater good. Ladies and gentlemen, it's nearly impossible to progress or discuss the progress of humanity and the continuous advancement of society without considering the development of human knowledge. You cannot discuss the development of human knowledge if you do not discuss the power of university to shape both specialized and general knowledge. And the attempt or the concepts that divided town or gown historically have already been challenged on this platform for the last 13 years. So that's what I will not attempt to do. What I'll attempt to do is to presume that we now accept that town and gown must find where the hand shakes and then go from there forward. Because I think 13 lectures having said so makes this a well-established convocation lecture premise. Consequently, what we might want to answer is how do we attain a level of national development and wealth creation that allows us to truly solve problems for a generation. Nelson Mandela once noted that education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. Consequently, when we individually attain certain heights of academic achievement, we improve our computational capacity as individuals to solve problems. But in his groundbreaking book, Why Information Grows by Cesar Hilgado, he noted that the nations that truly become wealthy are those where the computational capacity of society can solve societal problems. You will agree with me that at an individual level, Nigerians are some of the most gifted, some of the most competent, some of the most transformative individuals at an individual level anywhere in the world. However, when you look at our capacity to come together, to mobilize the computational capacity of all of us to solve our societal problems, we then run into some challenges. Those challenges are the challenges that define nations that can use their head count to make their heads count, and those that are unable to solve their problems. So education for development and wealth creation is about raising the computational capacity of society to leverage the individual capacity of individuals, societies, to design more advanced products, which makes you more competitive, to build better public services, and ultimately to build a better society. Hilgado notes that when a society has a computational capacity to create a set of more complex products, you call that computational technology, these countries are able to not only participate in industrialization, but they're able to compete with the rest of the world. So when you look at the first and second and third industrial revolutions, you basically saw countries that had the capacity to translate all their raw materials into more complex products. And what they did with us in Africa, that we became part of their computational capacity. So if you look at the first industrial revolution, it was manpower. For 200 years, it was manpower from Africa that flowed to these countries to fuse with their know-how to create more complex products. Now, as industrialization moved and they did not need our manpower, what happened? It shifted to our raw materials, and then the next 100 years was spent basically extensively stripping Africa of its raw materials and its wealth. So when a nation doesn't have the computational capacity to create more complex products to compete, it's at the mercy of countries that do. Now, what is computational capacity? Computational capacity is how institutions organize knowledge. And how institutions organize knowledge determines what those institutions can produce: goods, services, products. And so what you call an undeveloped country a lot of times is the capacity of a country's institution to produce these goods. Take, for example, the capacity of an institution to produce petrol. For decades, this nation, having built our own refineries, having brought in foreigners with the know-how to build the refineries, lacked the know-how to maintain it. That was a clear example where we had the money to buy the refinery, we bought it, brought it here, but had no capacity to maintain it. And sometimes the lack of capacity to maintain institutions comes from something that Professor Falola argued in his 54th lecture, that Nigerian capital was extracted for 200 years. It added to other nations' computational capacity to create their own wealth. But back home here, the institutions that we were basically bequeathed by the colonial masters continued to be extractive and did not lead to our own development. So third world nations is a term that, whilst it means many things, fundamentally can be used to describe nations that did not participate in the first and second industrial revolution and lacked the computational capacity to catch up with the third and the fourth. However, education is a way to shed this deficit. If you look at the nations that caught up in the Asian bloc, what we see is a decisive shift in their capacity to transform their societies, their economies, by leveraging knowledge, and by reorganizing the knowledge in their society and in their institutions to do very different things. So I want to break the rest of my lecture into these 6 parts to attempt to explain in this topic, hub for development, hub for wealth creation, first what we might call development, what we might call wealth creation, and what a hub effect might have on the 2 concepts. And then I will end by proposing some global best practices. So when we say education as a hub for development, what is development? There are many arguments about development and its puzzle, but I have a few definitions that I have found useful. The first definition is development is moving from a state of being underdeveloped. And underdeveloped is defined as a state that simply lacks the capacity to provide for itself, is an undignified, indefinable, vague state where there is no correlation between the wealth of the nation in terms of its endowments and in terms of the standard of living of its people. When there's a disparity between your potential and the reality, we say there is that gap. And that gap, of course, translates into deficit in human, economic, infrastructure deficits across board. Now, in moving from that state of the underdeveloped to the developed, a second definition that I found useful is Amartya Sen's definition. Amartya Sen says that all movement towards development is a movement towards freedom. And he has defined freedom as the capacity and the capabilities that provides the means and the ends for every individual member of a society to reach their optimum potential. Now, the challenge with Sen's definition is it came at a time where freedom was being defined as the liberation from colonial masters. Sen's argument in the capability theory is that freedom to achieve well-being is of primary moral importance, and freedom to achieve well-being must be understood in terms of capabilities. There's a difference between a man fasting and a man that is hungry. A man fasting on purpose has the desire, right, to eat and has chosen not to eat. A man that is starving has not been given the capability of access to food. So his starving is not one of choice. For there to be freedom, there must be agency, is Amartya Sen's argument. Therefore, Amartya Sen argues that there is no true development if we do not alleviate the deprivations of mankind. That as long as the deprivations exist in their different dimensions, that development, even if it's in terms of GDP growth, can be called developmentless GDP growth. And his argument, when speaking to, of course, his core constituency, which is the field of economics, where his own Nobel Prize came from, was that beyond the GDP growth, the question of the inclusion of society in growth was critical. And hence, diverse functions and means of development make it achievable only when a multidimensional, multifaceted pursuit of eliminating deprivations becomes the focus of national leaders and societies. The third definition of development, and I'll connect the dots on all this in a minute, is development is a process that comes from national institutions. This argument is Fukuyama, and Francis Fukuyama argues that nations don't appear from nowhere, and the institutions that drive those nations appear by choice or by default. So, three types of institutions develop in any society that is moving towards a modern state: political development process, economic development process, and social development processes. The argument is that if you're seeing development at all, political development has to be happening. And with political development, you can measure it by good governance, peace, security, law, and order. Economic development, you can measure by the potential of an environment to create economic value through trade and services locally, and to redistribute that value in such a way that it lifts all members of the society. And social development has to do more with the standard of living, social mobility of the individuals. Fukuyama argues that anywhere you see these three developments, you see a fourth development, which is the development of ideology and knowledge. And that the societies that achieved higher levels of development did so because of the fourth force, because there was the organization of knowledge to build political, social, and economic institutions. And argued that political institutions like the military, the rule of law institutions, the civil service institutions do not develop well where there is no knowledge institution or ideology institution shaping how that political institution develops. Same thing with economic, same thing with social. Unfortunately, those of us that inherited our institutions simply from colonial masters deal with a dilemma. Whilst we are going through independence, We are building our university system. We're trying to build the university system to catch up to global standards, and we're simultaneously trying to use those institutions to shape ideology and knowledge. That process sometimes means that the university as an institution to shape ideology does not catch up quickly with the political, economic, and social institutions, and hence developed nations that came out of colonial type rule struggled with setting the ideology that shaped their political institutions. What this has meant is that today you see many countries going through a conscious social reconstruction. For example, most of the Middle East socioeconomic reconstructions going on is not necessarily a movement towards democracy, but a movement towards socioeconomic inclusion. We see Saudi reconstruction, the Emirati reconstruction in the UAE, etc. And what they have done is to use the educational institutions to start to create disciplined economic and political institutions on purpose, shaped according to their own national values and according to their own national beliefs. China might be the only difference to this model because China built its meritocratic education institutions 2,000 years ago, and therefore kind of has a different model by which the political institutions evolved. When all is said and done, the primary focus of political institutions, which is to build a strong state with a concentration of power and able to manage and regulate tyrannical rule, military and citizens service, the three arms of government, legislature, judiciary, and executive that we have today, a federal and state balance of power, all requires education. It requires this computational capacity. Sometimes you ask, how do you build a political party? The truth is, many of us don't know how. How do you sustain a political party? Many of us don't know how. But somebody says, build a political party and run elections and provide a free and fair election that delivers power to the people. So, the education system can play a big role, and the university particularly play a big role in raising the generation of leaders that can transform these institutions. Now, the challenge, therefore, is that economic development, as fundamentally transforming society's collective knowledge into wealth for its people, is led by models that come mostly from elsewhere in the first instance, especially for third world nations like Nigeria and most of Africa. At the heart of economic development are these institutions that facilitate growth. So for example, in Nigeria, we've been having a big debate over tax and what tax institutions should do or not do. In fact, the economic stabilization bills have become so painfully debated that somebody has said we might as well just change the constitution now because we are now discussing fiscal federalism. The fact is that the institutions for economic growth are essential, to establishing a framework for taxation, rule-based markets, and the question of rule-based markets and whether markets will be free or not free, governed or planned or not, can be debated within the context of a nation. However, many a times we are cutting templates that do not necessarily mean that we as Africans and Nigerians have debated any of these matters to any significant degree. And herein lies the problem. Models that are disconnected or disoriented from our social development process, our political process, and therefore unable to solve our own problems. How do we build social development processes where the mechanization or the mechanisms of those processes allow the facilitation of progress so that social contracts hold? How do you hold social contracts in African societies where we are primarily drawn to altruistic connection with family first, kinsmen second, ethnic nation and ethnic nationalities third, before country? And whilst colonial rule disrupted that process for a while, still holds very true to many Nigerians and Africans. How do you build a nation where those processes were truncated for a while and many of those forces at play have not yet been addressed by the social development process? So there's a lot of questions about this. And like I said, my goal is not to answer all, but to note that universities at HUBS were not truly consulted in the expansion of Nigeria. When we started to build states, state formation in Nigeria, which was purely politically led, nobody came to the top 5 universities at that time and asked the question, how should we do this? What should back the sociology of state formation? What should back the economics of state formation? We were just bequeathed more states with mostly no real think through of the economic development and social processes required for their sustainability. This has had consequences and continue to have consequences today. Now, when we discuss wealth creation fundamentally, according to Adam Smith, in his inquiry of the causes of the wealth of nations, insists that the wealth of nations is about productivity. It is leveraging your demand and factor conditions and transforming it into opportunities, first for your people, then for your people to trade with the rest of the world that creates wealth. Unfortunately, if you were a nation that was bequeathed extractive institutions like Nigeria, most of the institutions were bequeathed at independence were by design extractive. They favored more of moving our raw materials to seaports to export them to other countries. Without a change in that model, the tendency was, even when we built industries, we had, I think His Excellency Fashola called it a conspiracy of do nothing. This morning. We built institutions and allowed them die. And what drove that was this conspiracy of the institutions themselves, the DNAs of those institutions being extracted. Now, any comparative study, and the NESG spends a lot of time on this type of studies, but any comparative study of Nigeria and its peers, one of the pairs that is worth looking at is Indonesia, because we and Indonesia in the 1960s looked very similar in terms of GDP, in terms of GDP per capita, in terms of structure of the economy, very similar. And what you see over a 30-year period is that we and Indonesia not only grew apart, but we grew very differently. Whilst in 30 years, Nigeria remained a very extractive country, we see that what happened in Indonesia is that it transformed itself from an oil-dependent country, shifted to a low manufacturing-based country in primary processing and intermediate products, and moved to a heavy manufacturing country in 3 decades. In those same 3 decades, Nigeria remained primarily an extractive nation, with 90% of our exports being crude oil and its major derivatives. 3 lessons from why that might have happened. One is that 30 years ago, the Indonesians made a choice with the education system. One was they asked simple questions. If we want to produce more complex products, what type of graduates will we need to produce? How do these graduates become trained to manage manufacturing complexes? So the education system, especially the university, shifted to not just manpower development and STEM. They shifted to industrial manpower complex models that allowed them to train an entire generation of industrialists. Now, that's on the education side, but it wasn't just education. Trade. They fundamentally shifted the terms of trade, refusing to export anything that they had not added some value to. Okay, so they put a halt on primary produce exports and said everything that came out of Indonesia would have at least first-level primary processing as a mandate. Mandates are important, ladies and gentlemen, because universities themselves do not offer national mandates. National mandates come from the political elite. But when a national mandate like that comes out of Indonesia, it's not possible for the university system to transform. So what Indonesia did in its first 25 years was to raise the floor, okay, to basically say there will be no child that will not have primary education, and the target was 95%. In 30 years, they achieved 98%. And then they then had a problem of, religious extremism that has now drawn them back. I think they're now back to like 80%, because extremism has said education is evil, and now there's a whole generation that is not going to school again. But with their universities, what they did was that they mandated university to industrial complex partnerships. Practically all your engineers and scientists were guaranteed that if they were not staying back in school to teach, they would find a job in industry. And they sustained that for a decade. What that meant was that universities were rewarded for producing specific types of graduates. That makes a difference. So when we begin to think of this hub between town and gown, and what that hub might mean, this may be some things that may come to mind. Ladies and gentlemen, before I end with some hub models, let me just point to some realities. From where we are today, Nigeria is projected, based on current projections, to be a country of 410 million. 410 million by 2050. By the way, we are currently a country where 65% of us, by MBS statistics, are under 35. But in 2050, the projections show that 70% of us will be under 35. So Nigeria will remain younger for longer. Now, whether that makes sense to us or not, the implications are quite clear. That it's not just putting people to work that matters. We are one of the countries that must put people to work at scale. So imagine a country at the current rate of unemployment, in 2050 you would have, say, 310 million people without work, of a population of 420. As you can tell, none of us can govern an environment that looks like that. But this does not have to be our future. In fact, this is not our future. Because by potential, by possibilities, by capacity, by skills, by knowledge, by the trajectory of convocation lectures like this, we know better. We just need to do better. So exploring the role of universities as hubs for development and wealth creation, at least in Africa, has its current imperatives, okay? 10 million children come out of our universities every year into the workforce on the continent. And we are currently unable to absorb more than 3 million of them. So by the way, it's not a Nigerian problem. It's just that we're a bigger part of the problem because of our size. But our size need not be an impediment, because there are nations bigger than us, whose population are larger than us, who have found a way to put their human capital to work. So the problem is not 400 million Nigerians. The problem is what you do with them in the future. Now, following the patterns of countries, the Asian tigers, Hong Kong, Singapore, South Korea, Taiwan, China, some of the nations we point to, what we have found is that there is a basic consensus model in the Asian countries that experience the economic miracle when it comes to economic growth and transformation. They put their universities at the center of the development agenda. Not the side, the center. The truth, if it's be told, is that education has stayed at the periphery of Nigeria's national development model. We think of it after the fact, not as the core to the fact. And that hasn't helped. It means we'll finish thinking about something that will open 2 windows for some professors to jump through. I will say we have some intellectual elite in the room. What we need is to challenge the university system based on national mandates, like the Asians have done. And this has made a difference in how the Asians have grown. Many years ago, we were visiting China at the beginning of the GSM revolution in Nigeria, and there were entire provinces dedicated to optical fiber transmission, entire universities dedicated to its research and its growth. We went to 6 universities. All universities had the best optical fiber transmission backbone labs in the world. Now, it's no shock that in that same decade, China led the world in terms of optical fiber transmission technology. And it's no shock that on the continent of Africa, of all installed telecommunication infrastructure, 92% is Chinese, deployed by Chinese. And I say this because we are now in the 3rd decade of our own telecommunication transformation. All of you have a digital phone. But how many universities have the transmission labs? How many universities have the know-how of the switching technology? This is the problem. We are importing technologies for which the computational capacity to organize the knowledge locally remains deficient because we have not taken the university system along. Now, when you do a comparative analysis of the Asian tigers and the Southeast Asian nations with successful transformation, the national consensus on education is always very clear. Literacy rate targets are between 75 to 85%, and universities as hubs for industrial transformation are core to its model. Everywhere you look, pick any country, pick any of the countries, look at the model, Japan incorporated, Taiwan incorporated, you see very similar models. So Asian countries that have become middle power countries, and by the way, we were meant to be part of them. If you look at the Mint and BRICS nations that was coined in 2003, we were meant to be sitting right there with Mexico, Indonesia, Turkey, etc. What they have done is to transform the education institutions into hubs. It's on purpose. It's not by mistake. It connects industry, government, and society. This is what birthed the triple helix and the quadruple helix movements in Asia and in many parts of India. And this is possible to us. Now, what we have found is that frontier mandates are crucial for these hubs to thrive. What is a frontier mandate? A frontier mandate is a clear set of goals that unite society. It must be bold, it must be audacious, but it must be something that the political elite, the business elite, the intellectual elite agree about. So for example, America had one bold frontier mandate, one crazy idea a few years ago, to put a man in the moon in a decade. And they went and rallied the whole society around it. Of all their problems on Earth, you'll have thought, why rally around a target in space? But they did. We here at home have had many frontier mandates, but they did not achieve consensus. National infrastructurization, the kind of money we need to spend on infrastructure. And His Excellency, who basically we could call the Honorable Minister of Infrastructure at one time, will tell you that the peanuts in terms of what is budgeted for cannot match the size of the infrastructure requirements of Nigeria. When are we going to have a consensus as to building the nation of our dreams? We already have the plan for it. It's called the Integrated Infrastructure Master Plan. It has a bill. It's 3 trillion. But here's the challenge. If today we had the cash to build this infrastructure, we would not have the workforce for it. And a good example is the Dangote refineries. As Alhaji Aliko Dangote said to build a refinery, he was looking for certain vocational level skills here in the country and took as best as he could what they could get. After screening and training, the trainable portion of that group, I think it dropped about 100. So of the people needed to drive this refinery you're seeing today, I think 30,000 are Nigerians, 11,000 we had to bring from outside the country simply because we didn't have that 11,000 know-how here. Now that's not a problem, because most societies actually start by borrowing the capacity to drive their development. The danger is not knowing when to transition from the borrowing to building your own. This is the miracle of emeritisation. It's a miracle of Saudicization. Is that for the last 30 years, they borrowed the technical capacity to build their sectors, but now they are in those 30 years, they built Saudis and Emiratis, and they're now transitioning back to their own. So even when we start these transformational processes with borrowed capacity to form our computational capacity to advance, where is the transition? Where are the hubs that allow for the transition of know-how, technology to come back to those of us that need it? So there are many other mandates. Agro-transformation is a mandate that needs to happen. Nigeria can feed itself and Africa, we know, based on the agronomics of our soil and the agroecology of our potential. But we have not been able to do so. It's possible to build a $1 trillion sovereign wealth fund, possible to us. But again, we need to build the know-how. Nigeria today, to farm the entire Nigeria farmlands, needs 2 million mechanized workforce, 1 million agronomic scientists, ag-tech, ag-scientists. Where are they going to come from? And if they came, is the work ready? Right? We must create 25 million jobs in the next 4 years, and 25 million jobs in the next 30 years. And those jobs will come from industrial transformation. So there are clear national mandates that can make a difference. Okay? So let me illustrate how one hub worked, and I'll use the American hub as I close. In 1962, the President of the United States basically announced that in a decade, America will put a man on the moon. And that started because, of course, the Cold War triggered a race between Russia and China, and the US on who gets to the moon first. And a dedicated program called the Apollo program was built to basically, in the first instance, assemble American competencies to do this piece of work. So first, they assembled the military men, of course, but the military men quickly noted that their education came from specific universities, and a hub of 20 universities were assembled with very precise mandates based on the capacities of those universities. So in my notes for your digestion, I list those universities. Now, please understand, no man had gone to the moon. So the mandate itself bordered on the impossible. However, the organization of the country's own knowledge showed some gaps. They lacked some science that they required. And so they started stealing the science from the Austrians, the Russians, the East Europeans. Any knowledge they did not have, they went to buy. Please understand, the computational capacity to go to the moon simply could not sit in one place by choice. Please understand, development does not sit anywhere by choice, but by default. It sits there by choice. It sits there by organizing it to be there. So the question is, how did they assemble these mandates? Simply by asking the universities what they do best. So if you look at Arizona State University, for example, lunar and planetary research. You look at MIT, for example. So some of these names we call today, and we think they became big universities because someone just pumped money. No, someone pumped capacity. So the development of the guidance computer for Apollo. And each of these universities contributing to this process basically built everything from manpower. In fact, there was a university that specialized in advocacy. You know? There was a university that its work, Rice University, its entire work was political and scientific advocacy for space exploration. Okay? So everything from the soft to the hard, wired scientific knowledge was hubbed together. Now, hubbing does not mean the universities are assembled in one place. No. Hubbing means that the universities assemble themselves around mandates that the country has agreed. So there's some strategic imperatives from this and other stories that might be important. First is an agreement to align objectives and priorities of national universities with the national frontier targets. Unfortunately, when you get us together and ask what is the target, we scarcely agree on what the target should be. So that's something that we need to solve for. Alignment involves collaboration between industry and government to establish clear vision for the future, and then the integrating of educational agendas in university to align. The second is proposals that establish collaborative frameworks between academic centers of excellence. So in the case of the Apollo project, the universities were not assembled by region. They were assembled by what are the centers of excellence needed to drive this frontier target of the country, and that's how they were pulled together. The third is focus that will realign research agendas with innovation and technology need to enhance competitiveness in Nigeria. So the research agendas themselves have to be reshaped. What determines what projects doctoral students do? And how are those projects influenced by the frontier mandates from business and government? The fourth is the imperative of the education hub to emphasize the independence of thought. When Arizona State University first created the first set of rockets, the military in the US had not gotten to that stage. Now imagine a university achieving a level of technology know-how that the military has not achieved. You know, that starts to cause a problem. You either shut the university down or something. So how do you allow for the independence of knowledge that allows universities to go fast? Till today, one of the few universities that can build a rocket end-to-end in the US is the Arizona State University. It's because the country authorized it to go as far as that. Sometimes the independence of thought does not allow us to go as far as we need to do. Fifth is there needs to be an emphasis on a strong respect for the philosophy of science. Humanities, arts, and social sciences aligned to national development priorities. Sometimes people say all these people are talking university is book. And so deep conceptual knowledge required for the foundation of the sciences and the developmental innovations do not happen because knowledge is not respected. And therefore, the teaching, the pedagogy that then shapes research agendas falls apart completely. If we get this right, just give some more respect. Professors of research should spend some time in industry. And professors of practice, who are industry practitioners, should spend a lot of time in class and in the labs. We need to create programs that make that happen right now. Because the truth is that the problem at the front line, you know, last year I've been to 36 states of the Federation because of food security. The problems at the front line are very different from what I hear academics speak about. You're dealing with varieties of seeds that are now low yield, and they are the ones in majority, 92% of them. You know, we were dealing with Z-maize Saturn 4 last year, which was pervasive. 82% of it was planted. Now it has a yield factor of 1.9. Now there's a higher Z-maize strand that does almost 8.2 yield per hectare, but it's not, we can't plant it at scale. Now, we're struggling with the science of nurseries. How do you scale that across the country on time to feed Nigeria, for example? So it will take professors of practice back explaining what's happening in the front for us to make progress. I spent a year in 2009, half of 2009 and half of 2010, in the Harvard Senior National Security Fellows Program. Grand commanders of Iraq, Afghanistan will return from war. They won't go home, they'll go to school. Yes, grand commanders, military ranked generals will leave theaters of war, come to school to debrief before they go home. And why? Because the philosophy for teaching the last set of generals to fight the last war was no longer useful to fight the current war. So the handbook of mass atrocities, the handbook for insurgency was written in university campuses by debriefing military generals. Because sometimes, yeah, they are in the front line. They can see the fog of war does not mean they understand the science. Does not mean they understand the sociology, does not mean they understand the art, does not mean they understand the humanities of what they are dealing with. But when they come to an environment that they can be decoded of their experience, then you use conceptual frameworks and theoretical concepts to make meaning of what doesn't make sense. And that leads to different sets of solutions. So bridging this gap requires all our consensus. It doesn't, we can't tell the university system to do it alone. It won't happen. We need to build Nigeria's future based on a set of technologies we own. And we can't own it by ourselves, especially because we are behind. We did not participate in the first, second, and third industrial revolution. In fact, our experience of the third industrial revolution has been partly reversed because we went from a country that had manufacturing capacity for tires, for cars, and reversed that. You know, we went from having Volkswagen in Lagos, Peugeot in Kaduna, to where you can't find them. Now, we need a consensus to pursue technology differently, to pursue it, to own it for ourselves. Okay? We have our children coding on other languages, other computer languages learned online. But here's the challenge. Most parts of the telecommunication backbone today are not built in Nigeria. In fact, beyond the mast and the civil engineering of the base stations, most of the switching technology are built elsewhere. But there are some brilliant entrepreneurs that are now translating some of the rare metals in Nigeria into computer chips now, here in Nigeria. What is the connection between that and the campuses? And how much of that will shape the future industry of rare metals? When I hear about rare metals in Nigeria, everybody's still telling me about how we should ship all of it away. The old model, the old science. Now, the seventh imperative is, once you forge the university hub like this, right? Money stops being a problem. Sorry, just a note. Once you forge universities like this, money stops being a problem. In the last 5 years, MIT attracted $600 million just for improving solar. Stanford, $200 million with Gentech and Gilead Sciences, basically to create new diagnostic tools to detect cancer and other things like that early. So what we are finding is that universities that are tied to these hubs continue to attract more funding. Now, if you look at those names of those universities, these are the same universities that were in your Apollo project doing space. What they've mastered is not space. They've mastered the capacity to collaborate. The Ministry of Education needs to authorize massive, extensive liberties on partnerships that transcend what we have today. Holding institutions at the jugular to operate by this model that is not transformative does not work, has not worked, will not work. The seventh imperative is we need to establish the entrepreneurial hubs that help entrepreneurs understand what the university is doing and what they can take from the universities. When entrepreneurs think of universities, and it's not a Nigerian phenomenon, Steve Jobs checked out of his school, one of the best schools in the world, to go start his company. The founder of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, checked out of another school, right? What was the problem? The school could not catch up with innovation. And in fact, they felt that their professors were the inhibitors to innovation itself. So what have the schools done today? The schools have created innovation hubs in school to say, this is the boundary of the known. Between here and here, theoretical conceptual frameworks apply. Now, if you want to jump into the unknown, please, there's that box called feel free to knock yourself out. But what that has done is that innovation that used to leave school because there was no space in school It's staying in MIT. It's staying in Harvard. It's staying in INSEAD. And it's staying there now because these universities have understood that we hold the boundaries of the known. But our children and their minds hold the boundaries and the possibilities of the unknown. Your Excellency, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, a multidisciplinary, multi-dimensional, frontier, target-oriented national education hub, or HUBS, requires political authorization to be globally competitive. So we have to do a few things. We have to rebuild Nigeria's intellectual foundation to enhance productivity and competitiveness. These hubs can build leaders that manage the workforce of the future. And it's possible for Nigeria to become a leading industrial reformer in Africa. It should happen in our time. Because after 13 years of this university saying the same things, time to make progress, time to move, time to move. Number two, we need to establish an industrial development policy nexus with education hubs. When we discuss industrial policy, a lot of times we put education at the level of where we say skilled manpower and put a full stop. No. All the models we have seen around the world, education is at the core of the industrial development policy. At the core. At the core. Because it answers 5 questions. 1, if you are industrializing and you don't have the capacity and you need to borrow the capacity today, education answers the question where you will house the know-how to build the capacity tomorrow. But if you build your industrial policy based on just bringing people to exploit your resources with no capacity to build your own, then you end up where we are. An oil and gas sector that's been here for almost 6 decades. But when you look at the know-how to have run a refinery, it took us 60 years for our first private refinery to find its legs. And for that refinery to now shame our public refineries to come along. Almost kicking and screaming. To the students of the graduating class of 2025, I say to you the words of my late teacher, who he loved Latin for some strange reason. That generation taught in Latin. And he would say, Nanos gigantum humoris incidenses. And he usually was quoting Sir Isaac Newton, who said, if we have seen any further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. The younger generation needs to commit to mastery. And mastery means not doing the best you can. Mastery means being the absolute best at it in the world. But to achieve mastery, dear graduates, a couple of things come to mind. 1, find your ikigai. Find that thing that you love to do, that you're good at doing, that you're passionate at doing, that meets the need in the world, but most of all, that drives an economic engine. You find a young person says passionate about something, but the thing makes no money. I say you've not found your ikigai. And the Japanese had the wisdom to this. You cannot pick an ikigai that does not drive economic engine. You cannot be passionate enough to pursue something that does not pay the bills. Okay? Finding your ikigai is key. So find your ikigai and aim for mastery. Find the masters in your field. And then spend time to acquire the secrets that the masters of your field have acquired. It takes time. The book Tipping Point says it takes 10,000 hours of practice to master anything. In this microwave generation, hit and run generation, do it for 5 minutes and say you're not interested. I beg you, I plead with you, that to build the Nigerian of our dreams, masters must emerge across many fields. It requires focus, it requires time. And if you humble yourself and take the time to learn, then you will be able to earn anything you need to earn in this life. Learn what you need to learn first, then you can earn what is possible in your field. And basically, there's no field where there's a master of his craft and the means does not come. Mastery is a process, ladies and gentlemen, and for those of you that have been through the rigor of classroom learning, and you're now graduating, the question is whether you're now ready for the next round. Because your entire life will be the pursuit of mastery. But if you master your field, it will yield its results. And mastery, while it requires investment and effort, will be worth it, because you will be rewarded, has been celebrated as those who have made a difference in their field and in their world. So this is the proper order of things, ladies and gentlemen. If we see any further, it's because we as dwarves, we astride the shoulders of giants. And in our time, all things are possible. And whilst we deal now with a country that people beat blue, black, and red for being on its knees, a nation rises because of its people and its dreams. So I challenge you, rise. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Please let's sit. You will agree with me that today's lecturer has strategically put in the nation's space another topic for discussion with this guest lecture and convocation lecture. Please let's give him a better round of applause. We thank you most sincerely, sir. Thank you. At this point, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the chairman of the occasion says this is his first, and I'm glad he's starting on a beautiful note. I want to call him back to the podium for his closing remarks. Please welcome with me Mr. Babatunde Raji Fashola, SAN, CON, one-time governor of this city of excellence, Lagos State, former Minister of Works and Housing. Keep clapping until he comes for his closing remarks.
Thank you very much, and I think that I would start by asking us to rise once again and give a thunderous applause to our guest speaker. Thank you very much. You may take your seats. Thank you so much. I do that for many reasons. The first is that I had the privilege of seeing an advanced copy of the lecture. So when I saw 47 pages, I said, okay, we're in trouble. And if we leave here in 3 hours, it will be a good day. But you know what? He did it in under an hour. And that was truly brilliant. And I don't think anybody was bored. I wasn't. I was listening. I was making notes. Now, the first note I took was that he said to us that he was not an academic. If you believe that, you believe anything. But he's a PhD holder, he has doctor. So, but he said again that he approaches problem solving from the perspective of a realist. And for somebody who had very deep seminary experience, this is a very, very welcome departure. To be real rather than spiritual. And we've seen that the examples have been examples we could all connect to, we could all relate to, all of the things that challenge our country. So that's one reason I asked for an applause for him. Now, the point to make, which he made in many ways, is that once you have an institution like this in any event, the only thing that institutions like this do is to train people, isn't it? And therefore, as you have people being trained, they acquire skills, they get out, and they get on to different. So again, naturally, this community is a hub of development because a skilled person is already a developed being. Isn't that so? But he was telling us that no, it's not enough to allow these individuals just go. We must master their skills. And that is where I believe he quoted Hidalgo, talking to us about how to transform individual capacities into institutional capacities and so on and so forth. I believe you have copies of the lecture. And this is where I want to make my final pitch before I yield the stage. The Vice Chancellor and her team have quite a day, but I just want to leave us with that massing of capacities and ask us, perhaps to first suggest to this institution that that capacity exists here. There used to be an institution called UNILAG Consults. Is it still functioning? So they provided a lot of advisory support. They solved problems for me when I was governor. And by the way, they made money. They didn't do it for free. And I used them to challenge LASU to establish LASU Consult. Yes. You know, we were back then in opposition, so I said all the money can be going to federal. Let's keep some in Lagos. But that's a kind of example of putting capacities of individuals into an institution. And of course, there's a debate. That's why I asked whether it is still existing. People talk about institutions without necessarily focusing enough on the individuals. But the truth is that institutions are developed and destroyed by individuals. When institutions do well, it is good men and women who have done well. And when institutions do otherwise, it is men and women who drop the ball. So using UNILAG, for this conversation to move forward beyond the lecture, I just asked this question. How many of us are familiar with the word Dirty December? We all know it. Fantastic. Do we know how it started? Aha. Research. It was credited to one singer, but that's not the conversation. It has gained a life of its own. But there is enormous opportunity there. The numbers that are unverified about the economic impact alone is tremendous. But while we are frolicking and partying, the other world is already watching. If you use your search engine and enter Dirty December, you will see an entry by Wikipedia. They're already monitoring. But it's happening where? Here. So they found out that in the month of December alone, remittances from diaspora is already equivalent to 4% of Nigeria's GDP. Is that a developmental opportunity? Who is curating it? Who is branding it? Who is mobilizing the manpower around it? So nations live on a subset of tourism that they call MICE. MICE is an acronym for meetings, incentives, conferences, and exhibitions. But it is about destination. One of the things that has come out of this last event of Dirty December is that it has opened a positive image for Nigeria. All of the young men and young women who came here from other parts of the world are reliving their experiences on social media. So there's interest in the place called Lagos in Nigeria, and we can expand it. And it's for us to be deliberate, to be intentional, and to have mandates around tourism. As our guest lecturer has told us, Dirty December has opened the door. Are we ready to seize it? Why should Dirty December end in Lagos? Why should it not spread? So are we preparing for the next one? Who are going to be the transporters? Who are going to provide the accommodation? There was almost shortage of accommodation. So how many of us are ready to leave our homes, furnish them, do them up, and rent them out during the period? Because the demand will come. And if we don't respond, it will go somewhere else. So for those who have been to Mecca for pilgrimage, those houses we live in, apart from the hotels, can't do it. So people leave their houses, rent them out, and go to their villages to make dollars. That's income, that's opportunity, and prosperity from tourism. But there's a lot of work to be done. And in preparing for the next event, think of beddings, think of fittings, think of maintenance, think of furnishing, think of repairing vehicles, getting everything. The list and the value chain is endless. Ladies and gentlemen, that is where I want to leave this conversation, just to provoke us to think and to act. And as our guest lecturer said, this nation will rise in our time. Thank you very much.
We thank you most sincerely, Chairman of today's convocation lecture. Please let's give him another round of applause. Thank you. At this point, permit me to call back our Vice Chancellor to do what we usually do. We usually say thank you to our convocation lecturers. And so permit me to call back to the podium Professor Folashade Ogunshola, ON, FAS, our Vice Chancellor, for the presentation of gifts to both our chairman of this occasion and the guest lecturer. Please a round of applause for her.
May I humbly request our Vice Chancellor, Professor Folashade Tolulope Ogunshola, ON, FAS, to please step forward. The first recipient is the guest lecturer for today, Dr. Tayo Aduloju, CEO, Nigeria Economic Summit Group.
On behalf of the staff and students of the University of Lagos, we would like to thank you for that treat. Very thought-provoking. And I can assure you that we shall be working
to see how we're going to get the country to build consensus around serious issues, the things we need to handle. So on behalf of us, can you open it? I would like to, this is the works of our students and from the Creative Arts Department. This was done by students of the Creative Arts Department. Thank you very much. Our non-academic academic. Oh. Okay. Thank you. And this is just for us.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations. Thank you. We shall be calling you. Yes. You can give it to you.
Thank you very much. The next recipient is the chairman of today's occasion, former executive governor of Lagos State, former federal minister of works and housing, and someone, and power also, someone I've always admired to be my role model and my mentor, Mr. Babatunde Raji Fashola, SAN-CON.
Your Excellency, to thank you for the great summation of that lecture and leaving us with a charge. I can assure you that we will take up that charge. And I can also assure you that in taking up that charge, you will not be uninvolved. Because as you said, we have to go where the capacity is. We don't have all the capacities, but we shall use all the capacities we have access to. And we have access to you. We have access to the lecturer. We have access to many people in this room. I will not say much. We have access to many people in this room, the Pro-Chancellor being one of them, and other people from industry. We will be calling on you because together we really must optimize our potential. We have them, but we're in silos. And so as University of Lagos continues to drive that town-gown collaboration, it can't just be in little bits. We really must do it at scale, and we must do it around consensus. Where are we going? What do we want? What kind of Nigeria are we looking at? And what does success mean? So on behalf of all of us at the University of Lagos, we thank you very much. And from our students at the faculty, at the Department of Creative Arts, this is for you. You see, we had to give UNILAG. I mean, he didn't come to UNILAG, so, well, you know, this is just to help him along. You're welcome. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, I'm remiss of me. Just a little, some other tokens from us. Thank you very much.
His Excellency, sir. His Excellency, I will never have this opportunity again. I watch you on television when you're a governor. I watch you when you're a minister. I have the singular honor to have an handshake with you, sir.
We will crave the indulgence of everyone on this. big table to please come for pictures.
Members of the Governing Council of the University of First Choice and the Nation's Pride.
Can bring it forward a little bit. Sorry, commanding them.
Thank you very much. At this juncture, may I humbly and respectfully invite the Acting Registrar and Secretary to the Governing Council of University of Lagos, Mrs. Olakunle Esther Makinde, MNIM, for a vote of thanks.
The chairman of this convocation lecture, His Excellency Mr. Babatunde Raji Fashola, CON, SAN, the former Federal Minister of Works, Housing and Power, and former Governor of Lagos State. Our eminent guest lecturer, Dr. Tayo Aduloju, the Chief Executive of Nigeria Economic Summit Group, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all other protocols duly observed. It is my honor and privilege to stand before you today at this significant moment in our university's journey, the 55th convocation lecture, to give the vote of thanks. This occasion not only marks a milestone in the history of the university, but also celebrates the spirit of academic excellence and entrepreneurship that defines our university. In the last 1 hour or so, we have listened to an excellent and thought-provoking lecture on the topic, Universities as Hubs for Development and Wealth Creation. You will agree with me that it has been an hour well utilized. Permit me, ladies and gentlemen, to thank profoundly the Vice Chancellor of our great university, Professor Folashade Tolulope Ogunshola, OONFAS, for the excellent choice of the convocation lecturer as well as the topic, which is not only apt, but also highly relevant in today's socio-economic climate in the country. Also for the very hard work in ensuring that the convocation lecturer, Dr. Tayo Aduloju, and the chairman of this occasion, His Excellency Governor Babatunde Raji Fashola, accepted to be in our midst today. We all know how busy their schedules are. We thank Mr. Babatunde Fashola most sincerely for creating time out of his busy schedules to attend and ably, masterfully chairing this historic event. On behalf of the University of Lagos, I express our profound gratitude to you for your presence. It is a great honor and a testament to your unwavering commitment to nation building, leadership, and human capacity development. Your wealth of experience spanning public service, governance, and infrastructural development has not only shaped our nation's progress, but also serves as an inspiration to all. As the chairman of this occasion, your guidance and remarks have set the tone for today's discussions, underscoring the critical role universities play in driving development and creating wealth. We are deeply grateful for your time, wisdom, and support in making this event a resounding success. Please clap. We must also acknowledge your exemplary leadership and dedication to improving lives through public service, which align perfectly with the values we seek to instill in our students. It is our hope that your continued partnership with the University of Lagos will inspire the next generation of leaders and innovators. Thank you once again, Your Excellency, for gracing this event with your presence and for your invaluable contributions to this memorable occasion. We remain ever truly grateful. On behalf of the University of Lagos, I wish to extend our deepest gratitude to our distinguished lecturer, Dr. Tayo Aduloju, for delivering such an insightful and thought-provoking lecture. Your expertise, passion, and thought leadership have not only enriched our understanding of the critical role universities play in fostering development and driving economic growth, but also inspired us to reflect on how we, as an institution and individuals, can contribute more meaningfully to this cause. Your lecture has provided a wealth of knowledge, practical insights, and a renewed sense of purpose that will resonate with us for years to come. We are truly privileged to have benefited from your wisdom and experience today. Once again, thank you for honoring us with your presence and for contributing so significantly to the success of our 55th convocation lecture. We hope that this marks the beginning of an even closer relationship with the University of Lagos, and we look forward to welcoming you once again in the future. Thank you very much, sir. We appreciate you. Can we put our hands together to celebrate these distinguished Nigerians once again? To our esteemed members of the University Governing Council, ably led by our Pro-Chancellor, amiable Chairman of Council, Chief Wole Olanipekun, CFR, SAN. Thank you very much, sir, for your unwavering leadership and dedication. Your vision and commitment have continued to propel this institution to greater heights. We appreciate the University of Lagos, excellent members of Council, Dr. Bola Njoku, thank you very much, ma'am, Professor Segun Idowu, Chief Olaniyi Akonde, Mr. Isaac Folorunsho, Mr. Parawa Essien, representing the federal government, Federal Minister of Finance on FNGPC. We also appreciate the elected representatives in Council, Professor Olukemi Odukoya, Professor Solomon Akimboye, members of congregation, the representative of congregation, Professor Owolabi Latif Kuye, Professor Mike Adebamowo, and the convocation representative, our engineer Ifeoluwa Oyedele. I would like to take a moment to sincerely thank the members of University of Lagos Management under the leadership of our distinguished Vice Chancellor, Professor Folashade Ogushola, for their exemplary leadership and tireless efforts in steering this great institution to these enviable heights. It is under your capable leadership that we continue to break new grounds, impacting lives and contributing meaningfully to national and global development. We deeply appreciate your hard work, passion, and teamwork, which have made today's occasion both memorable and impactful. Thank you for your support and for continuing to nurture an environment where excellence thrives. We are very grateful for your service, and we look forward to the continued growth and achievements of this great university under your leadership. We must say thank you to the formidable and highly supportive members of management of the University of Lagos. There are many, I cannot mention all of them. We know the Deputy Vice Chancellors, Professor Lucian Obinachukwu, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Development Services, sorry for that slip, Professor Ayuashenua, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academics and Research, Professor Bolobo, the Bossa, Mrs. Oluwafemilola Adekunle, the University Librarian, Professor Yetunde Zaid, the former Provost College of Medicine, and the new Professor David Oke, and the new Provost, Professor Ademola Oremosu, Director of Academic Planning, Losoju Ilori, Director of Quality Assurance, Professor Olufemi Shaibu. We cannot thank you enough, sirs and mass. The distinguished members of Senate of the University of Lagos, on whose shoulders lies the academic work that are celebrating this week, we thank you for your commitment to duty and loyalty to the university. May God reward you abundantly above what you could ever think or imagine. All honorary awardees of the university are professors emeriti, distinguished professors, gold medalists of the university. We thank you all for coming and making today's event a grand occasion. Deans of faculties, heads of departments, directors, deputy registrars, deputy bossers, we sincerely appreciate you all. Also in our midst, we have the past principal officers of this university. I could see Dr. Ikpaye. You are all recognized. Dr. Dekunle is here. All other past principal officers of the university who are here present, we recognize you. And we thank you for your commitment to the University of Lagos. I also extend our sincere appreciation to our faculty and staff for their tireless efforts in ensuring that the university remains a beacon of quality education and entrepreneurship training. Your hard work is the foundation upon which our students and alumni continue to excel. Many thanks to the member of staff, academic and non-teaching, the registry staff, the bursary, audit, works and physical planning, CITS, security, etc. And all the staff unions, ASU, SANU, NAT, NASU, we thank you. To our graduating students, today's convocation lecture has been a powerful reminder of the limitless possibilities that lie ahead. As you prepare to embark on the next chapter of your journey, we enjoin you to continue to uphold the values of excellence, innovation, and integrity that this university instills. Our royal fathers, traditional rulers, religious leaders, we recognize you, your royal highnesses. We hold the chairman and members of the ceremonies committee, ably led by Professor Oluwafemilola Obameke, a lot of gratitude. It's been months of hard work. We are grateful for your painstaking efforts. We are grateful to the gentlemen of the press for the positive coverage of our university activities. God bless you. Our audience who are online in various parts of the world, who took time to listen to this lecture, our audience on UNILAG radio and television, we cannot thank you enough. To our partners, donors, and supporters, we deeply value your contribution and collaboration. Your support enables us to continuously strive for distinction and global relevance. To our guests, alumni, and friends of the university, who have joined us today, thank you for your presence and support. Your involvement strengthens our community and reaffirms the significance of the occasion like this. Finally, our most sincere gratitude goes to the Almighty God, who continues to illuminate our paths with wisdom, and for making today's event a reality and a huge success. As we conclude this session, let us carry forward the inspiration and wisdom gained from here today and channel it into actions that will further impact this great university. Once again, I thank each and every one of you for making this convocation lecture a memorable and enriching experience. I would like to seize this opportunity to remind us that the convocation ceremonies will continue tomorrow, Tuesday, January 14, 2025, and will end on Thursday, January 16, 2025. Kindly attend punctually. Thank you for coming, and God bless you all. Olakunle Makinde is my name.
We thank you most sincerely, Acting Registrar, University of Lagos. Please give her another round of applause. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, everything that has a beginning surely must come to an end. And I'm glad to say we have come to the end of this 55th Convocation Ceremonies Convocation Lecture. Let's give ourselves a round of applause. I will crave your indulgence that we please stand and take the first verse of our national anthem while we allow the procession to go through the aisles. Thank you very much. The first verse of our national anthem.
Nigeria, we hail thee, our own dear native land. Though tribe and tongue may differ, in brotherhood we stand. Nigerians old and proud to serve our sovereign fatherland.
Very much. Kindly let's clear the aisle for the procession. Thank you.